Hi, it's Kim McGrath from Expressions of the Universe, and I have a 2025 financial forecast for the collective, for the globe. And I thought this was so important because, number one, not only am I an astrologer, but I've been in finance for nearly 43 years of my life, and I have seen a lot of ups and downs in the markets. And I've come accustomed to knowing, being in this business, what to look for. But being an astrologer, I also like to incorporate the astrology. So as I got older and more educated, better educated in astrology, I started to put the correlations together, and it was really interesting. So I'm going to give you this little presentation, let you know what I think is going to happen globally for the collective. Um, a lot of it is driven by the United States economy because all global currencies and economies are usually um, tested up against the US dollar. And we do have a lot going on in the United States with a new incoming president. We're entering the year in a sorrowful or mourning phase due to the passing of a former president, Jimmy Carter, the 39th president of the United States. And so I took that as a symbol and also as a signal because I pay attention to signs and symbols and omens. You know, the flag, the American flag, is to be flown at half staff for an entire month. That will be through midnight of January 28th, 2025. So when I say we, I mean the United States, American citizens are entering this new year in what is known as a mourning phase. Mourning, Mourning. Um, and so it's interesting looking at that as a symbol and as a signal, a precursor, if you will. I don't know. Let's take a look at my presentation and find out more here. I'm going to share my screen with you. Myself up into the corner. So this is my 2025 financial forecast. This is just an overview. I also want to point out that I did a 2025 full tarot and oracle card forecast for the collective, for the globe, and for all zodiac signs. I also did a 2025 into 2026 astrology highlight overlook as to what is coming planetarily wise over the next year, year and a quarter. I will be producing more videos that will break down the astrology of the current times as they come through over the next few weeks. You can expect quite a bit of content from me. So please like and subscribe to my channel so that you're notified as I'm putting out this information. There's so much happening in the world over the next 2 years, 3 years even, that it's going to take quite a bit of time for quite a bit of videos to talk about everything that's going to be happening. and break everything down. And as you know, if you've been following me, this is just my disclaimer that this program is for informational and entertainment purposes. Um, Legally, I have to do that by my Commonwealth and state law. All right, so I'm looking at finance mainly from an astrology point of view here. I borrowed this slide from Trudy Carroll. She had created this in a presentation back in 2023. It gives a very high level breakdown of what each planet represents financially. And this is just a very short list and an example. It's not all inclusive, but I could spend a day just talking about the sun or Venus or Pluto for that matter. Um, so as you can see, the sun is the life force of a stock or an index, country's leaders, it triggers events, and it also represents gold. The moon would be investor emotions, so that would be you, the people. The sentiment as to, are you going to be bearish or bullish? Are you going to be aggressive or conservative with your money? Day swing fluctuations, and silver is ruled by the moon. Mercury, it's the merchant, it's commerce, trading and investing, transport, communication. Venus. Now, Venus is huge because Venus is the overlord of money itself. Think of Venus, it's all about love and money, but it is banking, finance, currencies, beauty, fashion, art, and copper. Mars, the planet of war. So there's aggression there, military defense, weapons, mining, sports, steel and iron. Jupiter, the great benefic that likes to expand things, make things bigger, whether that's good or bad, is distant travel. So foreign entities sometimes, the law, education, advertising, sales, and religion. Saturn, government, corporations, infrastructures, builders, and lead. Uranus, the big chaos maker, technology, digital, cryptos, electronics, automotive. It's also aeronautic. Neptune is oil, diesel, LNG, beverages, drugs, poisons, which isn't on there, film, music, and inflation. Pluto, all energy resources, waste management, debt, and insurance. It is the big transformer. Two things to note. The great benefics are Venus and Jupiter, and the greater malefics are Mars and Saturn. But I also want to point out that the nodes, the North Node and South Node, Rahu and Ketu, can symbolize the financial struggles and debt-related issues, personally or as a country or globally. So it really depends on what signs are the North and South nodes in. It really does drive global economies. So here is a theory of the stock market forecasting. This is a graph that was drawn up and a theory designed by Louise McWhirter in 1938. And it really has rung true from previous to 1938, the Great Depression in 1929, all the way through present time so far. And the general economy moves in a 19-year business cycle. It's actually 18.6 and some change. It's a synodic period of the North Node. So we're specifically really looking at the North Node at this point. And I will be talking about the South Node as well later. So generally, stock prices are up and they are at their peak when the North Node is in Leo. Conversely, when the North Node is in Aquarius, prices are hitting rock bottom. Stock prices, markets fall, things drop. Currently, the North Node is in Aries, but we're on a downward trend. The North Node will move into Pisces on January 11th. So right there, just knowing that and knowing, looking at Louise McWhirter's theory of stock market forecasting, is that prices will be dropping. They won't be hitting rock bottom, but they are on a downward trend. Now, what I have seen, which I find interesting, is that when the North Node, maybe it's even the South Node, is in Libra, we happen to have 3 marked crashes in global economies. So we'll take a look at that in a moment. But according to this, if we look at Leo being the peak, then we go in this trend. Cancer is doing pretty good, Gemini, and then it starts to go into a downward trend. Gemini and Sagittarius, you're pretty much in a normal period, or say Scorpio, Taurus. Now, Taurus is ruled by Venus, which is money. Scorpio by Mars and Pluto. Libra is also ruled by Venus. Aries by Mars. So maybe that's where the volatility comes in. But you could take a look at this trend. So if we're in Aries now and we're moving into Pisces, we're going into a downward trend, then we'll hit rock bottom 18 months from now, which will take us into what? We're entering 25. We'll go all the way through 25, halfway through 26. So about midpoint 26, we're going to hit rock bottom. And I've lost my mouse. Where did it go? There it is. And then that'll carry us through midpoint 26 to the beginning of 2027. And then we can start to see a little bit of recovery after January of 2027. And then we'll be on an upward trend. These cycles, like I said, it's roughly, as you know, rounding up, a 19-year cycle. So the North Node will spend approximately 18 months in each sign. So if we're moving into Pisces and then we have to go through Aquarius, you know, you're looking at 36 months, about 3 years. So before we start to pull out of it. So don't be shocked by my graph. This is an astrological ephemeris. And an ephemeris just lists month by month the days of the month and what each sign is in, as far as what sign each planet is in and the degree. And what I'm doing here is I have this color coded, and I learned this from Trudy Carroll a couple years ago when looking at financial astrology. So I could see it in a chart. However, she would pull up the ephemeris and then she could look at everything uh, right there on one page. Um, and I found that this method is pretty compact and concise. So here we have October of 1929. That is known as the Great Depression. And it was mostly in America, but of course it trickled all around the world. I know Great Britain was going through similar pains, as were other countries. I pointed out here that the exact date was Tuesday, the 29th of October. So I have the Sun, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Saturn, and the nodes highlighted. So the one is the true node, the other is the mean node. It's just a different way of calculating. Sometimes they are very close to each other, other times they're not. I pulled all of these ephemeris slides from astro.com. It's a free resource if you want to take a look at any ephemeris for the past few thousand years. It's such an amazing free resource. You'll also see here that I have this C 5 degrees of Gemini with the brown coating, the C representing Ceres, which is an asteroid. But Ceres is also known as Demeter, who was the mother of Persephone, and it's represented by Virgo, but grains and the harvest and food and our food resources. I thought it was important to symbolize that. I maybe I'll do another breakdown of the other main asteroids up against this, because I do have another ephemeris that I carry around with me 24/7, which does include all of the asteroids. But taking a look at this, so my highlighted aspects, some things to look out for is, now I told you Venus rules, Libra is ruled by Venus, and Taurus is also ruled by Venus. Venus represents money and currencies right off the bat. We also want to, so we're, sorry, let me back up. We have the Sun in Libra ruled by Venus. We have Mars in Libra ruled by Venus. And we have the node, North Node in Taurus ruled by Venus. We also want to look at whenever a planet is changing signs, moving into a new planet. So there's a lot of energy behind that. We also need to look at when a planet stations retrograde. So we're coming into the month with Mercury in retrograde, but then it will go direct. So whenever it is changing from direct to retrograde or vice versa, there's a lot of energy in that. Also, too, the further out the planet, so here's the sun, the further we move away from the sun, the stronger that energy, because the planets move so slowly. So there really is a very intense buildup of that energy. So here we can see we're entering October with a lot of Libra energy. The moon, I also pointed out Libra, but at the time of the crash, it was also in Libra. Now, all of this made sense to me when I was highlighting it, and hopefully I can figure out where my mind was going, because I see 27 here, but I'm like, okay, wait a second. I'm not seeing any 27s. All right, so we know right before this crash, Mercury was going direct. I also want to point out that Taurus is a money symbol. So North Node in Taurus, we know that we could have a lot of ups and downs. We just recently, 2 years ago, came out of this North Node in Taurus, South Node in Scorpio, and that was during the pandemic, which was global, and the economies were affected greatly. We also had Venus changing signs right before the crash, moving into zero Libra. So I'm looking to see what can I line up with zero. And we have Uranus at 3 degrees. I like to use a 3-degree orb because I want to keep it tight. The closer the aspect, the more power it has. Also, what I want to point out is whenever the sun is within 30 degrees, it's going to act as a trigger to any of these planets. So, the sun at 7 is triggering Venus at 6, Virgo. Even though they are one sign away from each other, they are within 30 degrees. So I just want you to keep that in mind. Hopefully you are still following me. Anyway, now I got to go back to my thoughts because I can't find my train of thought. So Mercury hits 12 degrees. That triggers the North Node at 12 degrees. Then we have, I thought I probably have notes. Hold on a second. I think I may have notes at the bottom of oh, darn. Nope, it's not what I wanted to do. I thought I had notes. Oh, I do. Okay, sorry. I do have notes, but I don't think I can see them when I'm in full mode. I can't. That's not what I wanted to do. Sorry. All right. This is why I have some of these highlighted. I want to point out that only a couple of days after this market crash, November 1st of 1929, we had a solar eclipse at 8 degrees of Taurus and Scorpio. Taurus and Scorpio, the same as the North and South nodes. Throughout the year, though, we also had eclipses at 18 degrees and 24 degrees. So you'll see where I am highlighting anything at 18 or within 3 degrees because those are triggers from past eclipses. Eclipse energy, depending on whether it's a total lunar eclipse or a total solar eclipse, partial, that energy can last anywhere from 3 months before to 3 months after, up to 18 months before and after. So those are other triggering events. Although this does not look like a total perfect storm, there were enough triggers here to create a collapse. Now, I didn't look through the whole entire year. There could have been other things happening. I'm just trying to keep this simple. One of the other big factors, and I do have it highlighted in red, is Pluto, the planet of transformation, was stationing retrograde. That was also triggering the 18-degree eclipse. It was triggering Black Moon Lilith. Nothing Uranus. The 8, that's Neptune, I'm sorry. Is that? Yeah, Neptune. But the eclipse on November 1st, was also triggering Uranus, and that is the planet of chaos and unexpected happenings. So I'm just wanted to point that out. Moving on, September of 2008. Oh, I think I got my slides backwards. We're going to go to 1987, October of 87. Now, take a look. Three really big crashes. We've got October, September, but it was the end, and then October again. Libra season, right? So that's ruled by Venus. And I had pointed out eclipses. Oh, darn. I'm trying to switch back and forth because I have notes at the bottom of the pages. We had 5 eclipses in 1987 and the varying degrees 8, 13, 23, 15. North Node was in Aries Libra. And then also September of 2008, the eclipses were in Aquarius and Leo. The North Node, South Node was Aquarius and Leo. North Node was in Aquarius, so that's rock bottom. If you remember when I talked about the cycles. Okay, I'm going to go back into my big mode again. I'm going to stop effing around with my slides so that I don't drive you crazy and I keep your attention. So October of 87, the 19th, that was known as Black Monday. I was in finance. I had been in finance for about 5 years at this point. And leading up to this, actually, almost a year earlier, my entire division had been laid off while I was on. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. Back up. I'm thinking 1986. I was on maternity leave February of 88. And because of this, my entire division got let go, laid off. So this was a very long-term financial crash. Yeah, I got my dates mixed up. And I found myself unemployed, but not technically because I was on maternity leave. And back then, they couldn't let anyone go that was on maternity leave. So I wound up getting a pretty juicy severance. I was offered a position in another division, but I went for the severance, which lasted me 5 years. Anyway, here we have the sun in Libra, ruled by Venus. Venus is in Libra. But we want to take a look at the North Node in Aries, which is ruled by Mars. So we have those triggers. Mars then moves into Aries right prior to. We have the sun in Libra at 25. So Jupiter at 24 is going to trigger that. Uranus at 23. That's also going to be triggering to that. And yes, Mars was at 6 degrees, but Mars was in Libra. So it is creating some of that tension. Now, why is this important? Because you may look and say, oh, there's only a few things actually highlighted here. Well, the sun in Libra to Jupiter in Aries makes a square. That's tension and volatility. The sun in Libra also squares at a very wide orb the nodes of the moon. And what else? What else? Also, Mercury, the merchant, was getting ready to go retrograde as well. And that was in Scorpio, which is ruled by Mars. So just You only need the trigger. You've got the sun at 25 Libra, and it is squaring Jupiter. And what is it doing with Sagittarius? It's actually making a sextile to Sagittarius, which is typically a good in quotes aspect. However, Sagittarius is ruled by Jupiter. So we have to bounce back to Jupiter being the driver. Um, and a lot of people always say, oh, well, Jupiter is the great benefic. But if you ever read my article that I have written years ago about Jupiter, he delivers equal ills and blessings. So you never know. And then when you're triggered by Uranus, the chaos maker, you just don't know what to expect. And we're going to go back to September of 2008. This had been building for so long. I had been saying for a couple of years, like, if we keep going the way we're going, doing the things that we're doing, everything is going to implode. This was like 2006 through September, October 2008 was just an absolute show in the financial sector. This was the bailing out of insurance companies and mortgage companies and absolute chaos. So most of this is all marked by red in indicating that the majority of this crash was really Mars driven for the most part. Now, I have this sun in Virgo highlighted in red. That is because it is at 8 degrees. Mars was at 8 Libra. It's within 30 degrees. So Mars is acting as a trigger point. You've got the moon also hitting Libra. And then again, right on that same day of the crash, went back into Libra. You have Mercury, the merchant, in Libra. You have Venus, the planet of love and money, in Libra, and Mars in Libra. Also, I have to point out the north node of the moon is in Aquarius. That is that rock bottom point that I showed you in the chart previously. We're going to be coming into that in about 18 months globally. Some other trigger points across the board. The Monday Monday the 8th, there was a lot of volatile activity happening. And then the sun herself moves into Libra only 6 days, 1 week barely before the collapse. Now, being in this industry and seeing this coming for a few years, the buildup, companies, banks, financial institutions, insurance companies were trying to prevent for the longest time this bubble from bursting. They were bailing each other out. You can check out a movie called Too Big to Fail. There were a couple of other movies. Too Big to Fail, I think, was an HBO special, but definitely worth watching. When I watched that, knowing who I worked for at the time, being one of those big players, this was playing out in real time for me. It really took me back. But what had happened was the global economy just could not hold off any longer. It had been trying to do so for about 2 years, and finally the bubble burst. And I found myself without a job for over 2 years following this crash, meaning a job in the financial sector. Um, yeah, so these were just some examples. Now, to get into the meat and potatoes of 2025, and I'm just going to do quick overview. So we're entering 2025. Like I said, the United States is in mourning over the loss of the 39th president of the United States. He will be lying in state, uh, probably up through the middle of January. The flag at half staff, a symbol of mourning, all the way through the midnight of the 28th of January. So here we are, we're entering in, we have the North Node in Aries. So if we go back to, real quick, I showed you, this is where the North Node is currently. It will be entering Pisces on January 11th, and we are in a downward turn with the node. All right, so January 11th. I don't have anything marked on that day other than the fact that, I mean, I should have highlighted that the node was changing. Sorry for that, but at least I am telling you that. Pluto has just entered Aquarius, so that will be triggering this node. I did not highlight that. Although towards the end of the month, we do have some triggers of Venus at 23 degrees. It is squaring Uranus at 23 degrees. So we have some tension there. And it is also being activated by Black Moon Lilith. At the very end of the month, we also have some triggers with the Sun in Aquarius to Jupiter in Gemini. That could be okay. But when you put together now Venus entering is in Pisces at 26, it's also coming back and triggering your Uranus. Oh, I'm sorry, Neptune. The symbols look so similar up here. So we talked earlier about Neptune being about inflation, and here's Venus. Now, they are only 30 degrees apart. So not a lot of tension, but I'm just pointing it out. However, Venus is conjuncting the North Node in Aries. It has retrograded back at this point into Pisces. So it enters, it's entering in, sorry, it enters into Pisces. I'm sorry, I'm really getting mixed up with my chart. It's leaving Aries and it's entering Pisces. That's where the mark is. So something is going to be happening. I feel like the downward turn really happens somewhere, possibly around anywhere from the 21st of January, where we see the sun and Pluto are conjuncting each other. So that's a trigger. I wouldn't say something's going to happen that day, but that's a trigger. And I think it's the start of the trigger. Then we have some more trigger points on the 31st. We do show volatility coming in right around the 27th. And more volatility coming in at the 31st. Moving on to February. All right, now we're coming into February. Remember I said when planets are changing signs, or if they're going retrograde or coming out of retrograde and going direct, those are important points. We have Mars is squaring Chiron, the wounded healer. Also, I didn't put this in my slide, but Chiron cycles every 50 years. And whenever Chiron is in Aries, we always have marked inflation. And Chiron still has about 3 years left in Aries. So if you look at that McWhorter cycle chart, I said we're in a downward trend, and it's going to take about 3 years, 36 months, for us to come out of what I feel is a recession that we're coming into. So these are just additional mark dates of triggers. I'll be curious to see how this plays out, especially, you know, because we do have a lot of trigger symbols, none by so much the nodes of the moon, Venus interplaying into Pluto. So, but we don't have any huge volatility. One thing I will point out is that Mars, which has been retrograde in Leo, moving back into Cancer, will go direct on February 23rd, 24th. But look how long it's in 17 degrees. Remember, I said when planets are going retrograde or direct, the energy is very concentrated and it builds up. So here we are in March. I'm also pointing out here, before we see the March slide, the eclipses for the year and the points, because then that'll go with this slide. This is, to me, going to be the biggest trigger point. You can see I have a lot of different things marked on the screen, all with all of the red, yellow, greens, the sun and Venus and Mars. These two big symbols, we have two eclipses coming in March, and that is making up the majority of what I have highlighted here. So these eclipses are triggering all of these areas. And I feel that if globally we start to go into a downturn, possibly at the end of January, we may not see it. Like this could be a buildup. We're definitely, so I feel like globally, we're coming into a recession. Whether it is a trickle from the United States and then across the globe, there are so many economies, though, around the world that are really doing terribly. And I'm going to show you an example of that in a moment. But I feel like by the time we hit mid-March, we're in trouble. And I don't even know if it'll take that long, but I'm mainly making this video as proof as to what I was seeing, so that as it unfolds, hopefully I'm wrong. I would really like to be wrong, but I don't think that I'm going to be, especially because of the squares and oppositions that we will be seeing within the planets, within those key player planets. April, I have Neptune highlighted. Neptune will be moving into Aries. Neptune is an inflation. I also had it down here. Actually, it starts at the end of March, right? Depending on where you live. Neptune is an inflation indicator. Neptune rules all of our energy sources, petroleum, electricity. Well, electricity is Uranus or Mercury, but all the fossil fuels, our waterways, which is our trade routes, ruled by Neptune. And here we have it entering Aries at the end of March. It's stationed at 0 degrees. So it's triggering anything that's at 0 to 3 degrees, which in this case is the sun, it's Mars, it's also Mercury in Aries, even though it's, within a couple of degrees. It is also being triggered by Pluto. So there's going to be some huge transformation. When I see this, I think about the waterways and trade wars, tariffs that are proposed to be implemented in the United States on foreign countries. What a lot of people don't understand is those foreign countries do not pay the tariffs. The people, the consumers, are the ones that will be the ones paying those tariffs. And this could greatly hurt our pocketbooks. So if I go back to January, we have a new incoming president on January 20th when the sun moves into Aquarius. It's the same date every single time. Aquarius being a very conservative and closed sign financially. It's ruled by Saturn traditionally, which is restrictor. If the tariffs get put into place on that day, that would start to indicate what I'm seeing here by the 31st. All right. And then we see those trickle triggers happening throughout the month of February. And then we land in March. Maybe this is when the impact really starts to be felt and take place, or there's a lot of upset globally. Because remember, whatever is happening in the United States does affect a lot of global markets. And then here we're back to Neptune. Trade routes, waterways, trade, petroleum, gasoline, mining. Mining it would be Pluto, actually. So yeah, although you're only seeing a few spots here, there is a lot of activity happening within the month. We also have Mercury going direct only, what is it, April 7th. So that's more energy. We have Neptune moving into Aries, which marks inflation. Okay, so here we are in May. We have Venus moving into Aries, Venus ruling money, Aries inflation. Then we have Mars in Libra, so which is ruled by Venus. They will be in mutual reception to each other. So there's volatility with that. That there's an opposition, butting heads. So we're feeling the pain. I have Saturn highlighted in red only for the fact of that it is a malefic. That too moves into Aries on May 26th. Now, these ingresses are only brief because they're going to retrograde back into their old signs and not really move fully into Aries until 2026. But we're already feeling the beginnings of it. They're dipping their toes in. Neptune and Saturn are dipping their toes into Aries, and that is definitely a mark of inflation. Keep in mind, Pluto is in Aquarius, and it's still hovering at 3 degrees, so it's within orb to those planets. The only one that's outside right now is Uranus, but he's going to be joining the party pretty soon, as you will see. And Oh, doesn't happen until July. But Jupiter moves into Cancer. Now that could be good. That could bring us a little bit of a soft spot. However, it's triggering Saturn. I didn't highlight it. It's triggering Saturn. It is triggering your Uranus, at a wider orb. Neptune, Pluto. So all of those bigger outer planets are all being triggered by June. Sun moves into Cancer on the 22nd. And that's why I have these highlighted, because they're all being triggered. I just think that March really kicks off what we're going to see for this 3-year period of time. So I'm not going to spend a ton of time going through. I'm going to go through these, but I just wanted to give you the gist. Uranus moves into Gemini. And so here we have another ingress. We have a lot of planets moving into new signs, unlike anything astrologers have ever seen for hundreds, maybe thousands of years. So all of the planets are being triggered right now. August, just a few more. We have just a couple more triggers going on. And then I wanted to point out that all of those outer planets will start to retrograde back into their previous signs until 2026. I'm also pointing out these eclipses again because September, coming into Virgo and then Libra season, we have more volatility. And we've seen it before in the 1929, the 1987, and the 2008 charts. So these are eclipse points. And just leading up to the eclipses, we have volatility happening, and then that in-between spot. So I feel like if something huge doesn't happen in March and through the rest of the year, it will catch up with itself, the economy. The bubble will start to burst possibly at this point if it doesn't come March. I feel like March is looking pretty hairy. And then we're in Libra season. And classically, from those other charts, you saw when Libra season, really things start to fall apart. And that is because Libra is ruled by Venus. A lot more of the same. A lot more of the same. Just these triggers, the volatility, and ending the year with some Mars activity. So let's see. Well, I want to continue sharing. What I wanted to point out was, so currently the US dollar, and hopefully you could see this well, because I have this up in real time. The US dollar really drives all of the other world and global economies. And sorry for all the advertisements to Lowe's. I was looking to purchase a new oven and refrigerator, so you're going to see these advertisements on here. But how do we measure the strength of each country's economy? It's based actually on the US dollar. So here we have $1, and then here's the euro. So the euro is at roughly 97 cents. And so what does that mean? Up against the dollar, we actually have to go over to this column. If we see, if over in the left column, if there's any currency that is less than 100, $1 US, then that means that that currency is stronger than the US dollar. It's easier to see it in this right column because you can see the US dollar 100. So the euro is at 103. The British pound 125, which is actually around what it was in 2009. And I remember that because the economy, from my perspective, was so good. It was much more friendly for tourists to go to the UK in that time in the early 2000s. Now, um, if you see any currency that is what appears higher than the dollar, then it means that it's actually weaker. So the Indian rupee, it takes 85, almost 86 Indian rupees to equal 1 US dollar. So it's basically worth barely 2 cents. The Australian dollar, so I was shocked when I saw this at $1.65, meaning that up against the dollar, the Australian dollar is only worth 61 cents. And then we have the Canadian dollar, $1.43, or barely 70 cents up against the US dollar. And then we can go on and on. Look at the Argentine peso, 1,030, kind of worthless. I heard that in Argentina, they're going through a terrible financial crisis. So that doesn't surprise me. The Colombian peso. So a lot of these South American countries, the Indonesian rupiah, well, 16,207. Their money is worth basically nothing. The Japanese yen is another big indicator that goes up against the dollar, and that's at 157. So we could see currently the volatility. Look at the Venezuelan bolivar. It's worth nothing. It's actually worth nothing. But Venezuela's been in a crisis for quite some time. Now we can go back and do a historic lookup. And just to remind you real quick, so we're just going to take a quick snapshot. We could of those currencies, not taking a snapshot, make a mental note. And also the Swiss franc is another strong economy. So if we go back, let's go back 10 years and see what the currency was doing. All right, you can see that the euro, well, just take a look at the British pound. It's at $1.25 now. 10 years ago, it was at 155. I think like the highest I ever saw was close to 180 something. I don't remember what year that was. The Canadian dollar, which is at 143 right now, or 70 cents, was much stronger. It was at 86 cents or $1.16, however, which way you were looking at it. The franc, which is at 110 right now, it was almost equal to the US dollar. And the Japanese yen, which we know is at 157 right now, was at 119. So that was much stronger as well. Look at the Argentine peso. Look at what a better position it was in 10 years ago. And go down to the Venezuelan bolivar. It actually had value 10 years ago, whereas today it has nothing. We go to when we were in the midst or in the bulk of the pandemic. We'll do 2021. We know the economy was doing pretty bad back then. So, and this was globally, the British pound was at $1.34. So 10 years ago, 155. Currently, 125. So right now, globally, the economy is already showing a downward trend. when you look at these indices. Um, so don't listen to what people are saying is like, oh, our economy's doing great, whatever. It really, it really isn't, because you can look at these economic indicators and see that even during the pandemic, when things were really bad, our economy was still in a better position. Okay, so you can even see now the Venezuelan bolivar, yes, was starting to lose value. And I think the pandemic just tipped it over a little bit further. Um, Let me think back to when was the economy really, really good? It was starting to pull out in 2010. So let's take a look at 2011 just real quick. Oh, it doesn't go back that far. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing at this point. So you get a pretty good idea of what I'm seeing, what I'm looking at, what I'm calling for. Um, I really feel that by the end of January, we're starting to see some triggers. Well, if you just looking at those economic indices that I was just showing you on the global currencies, we're already seeing a downward trend, uh, that every country's currency is losing money. And they're all based off of the strength of the US dollar. So the dollar will always remain at 100. And then every other country's currencies are bounced up against that. So when you see that other countries' currencies are falling against the dollar for the most part, with the exception of a couple of countries that are a little bit stronger, you can see that we are in a downward trend. I feel that by March, we could be entering a global recession because our governments just can't hold off this bubble any longer. And I want you to keep some things in mind when we look at the graph of the cycles of business cycles in the stock market. We are in a downward trend. That trigger happens on January 11th and will continue for the next 36 months before we start to pull out of it. Anyway, that is my take on global economy, the 2025 financial forecast. I would be really interested in hearing your comments and thoughts. I didn't break this down by zodiac sign because I think we're all in it for the long haul. Some will be affected more than others. And really, that comes down to your personal chart, and not just your sun sign or your rising sign or your moon, uh, because you want to take a look at your second house of value and money. You want to take a look at your sixth house of work and service, your eighth house of debts, and your 10th house of career. Like what's going on in those portions of your chart, what's transiting those portions of your chart, what's progressed, what is arcing. And so my books are going to be opening for January 2025. If you want to know more about your financial health, you can go to my website at expressionsoftheuniverse.com and book a reading with me. Be sure to check out my other 2025 forecasts with the tarot and oracle card and the overall astrology for 2025. Please like and subscribe. Hopefully somewhere down here, I can't have the disappearing hand, because I will be putting out more content breaking down all of these things as we pass the coming weeks and months ahead. So I hope you enjoyed this presentation, Happy New Year, everybody. Start to become more frugal and get that nest egg put away because I think we are all going to need it. And until next time, see you.